Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I'm going to share some thoughts and theories I have about Season 5 of Animal Kingdom. Obviously, if you have not caught up, do not watch this video because I'm going to be talking about spoilers. So obviously, you know, Season 4 ended off with some pretty big developments. Obviously, you know, the big thing going forward is like, how are the boys going to handle things now that Smurf is gone? Because obviously you had a little preview being like, you know, obviously the show's returning in 2020, but it's also the whole thing of like, oh, we get to run things the way we want to. That's been a big thing since the beginning for all the boys, but obviously, you know, even more so for Jay, because now it's like, you know, when he wanted to grab for power, like everyone get in his way, whether it be Smurf, whether it be Pope. Now the way is open, not just for him, but for everyone to kind of do things that they want to. But I think that's going to be the thing that, and I think that'd be a neat way to handle things, is to make it seem like, yeah, we got some wins here and there, but I think eventually it's going to get to the point where it's like, yeah, things aren't going to run as smoothly now that Smurf is gone. Like, I think it's going to be that situation where they kind of realize how much they needed Smurf, whether they realize it or not. They don't realize until she's gone how much they needed her, how much of an impact she had on their lives. You know, and I think it's set in, but I feel like it won't really set in until next season, like, you know, the void that is her being gone. I am curious to see, though, are they going to continue the whole aspect of, like, you know, obviously, you know, Smurf when she was younger. I think that might still be an element we see continue on, because there's obviously stories still contained to that, because obviously there's the whole Pamela situation, because I doubt it is just what it is. Like, what they showed us in the season finale where it was like, okay, like, Pamela helped out Smurf when she kind of had no one, you know, eventually she went to be with Jay, but I feel like there's got to be more to it, because we do know that, because they even said it like in her file that like Pamela and Smurf did work together. They do, so like something went down in that time frame when they were kind of doing stuff together before, you know. It's kind of interesting thinking about where they started and where they are right now. But because I was thinking, like, there's no way Smurf is going to leave all this to someone who just helped her out that one time. But even Smurf said it herself, she doesn't like owing people anything. Still, that was just kind of interesting. I'm sure we're going to get more of that, trying to, like, probably when we eventually meet Pamela present day, we'll probably, you know, get more backstory at that point of, like, you know. I'm curious to see what they end up doing, though, with the whole, like, cutting back and forth, because, you know, a lot of it's not like that's just extra story. Like, it does play a role in what's happening present day. I'm sure it's also going to set up some of the challenges the boys might go up against, because that's a big thing now that, you know, the queen is dead. Like, everyone is coming out the woodwork. Like, anyone that Smurf had like connections with, because there's that lady who shows up. Pope's like, oh, who are you? She's like, yeah, like, she dropped off like that food or whatever that Pope ended up throwing away. She was kind of like, yeah, like, so me and Smurf had this whole arrangement, like, she would pay me, so it's like, don't worry, you're going to get your money. So stuff like that, as well as enemies out the woodwork, you know, because that's the whole thing they did at the end, was to show like, yo, the Codys are fine. We have to show people, a show of strength, that just because Smurf is dead doesn't mean people can come take us down. But obviously we got a lot of familiar faces popping up. Jake, Billy. I never thought we'd see Billy again, especially after him ripping off Darren. Never thought so. I literally screamed at the TV. I was like, holy shit, when Billy popped up. So that's definitely going to be interesting, because they're going to, you know, because obviously, like, Billy's going to be trying to, you know, worm his way back into Darren's life. That's not necessarily going to work, especially because Pope is not the biggest fan of him. It's even when, you know, Billy gave that half-ass apology for the stuff that he did to Pope when he was younger. So there's that. There's a whole Jake thing. Jake's trying to be in Craig's life without telling him, like, oh, I'm your dad. So that's going to be something that Craig's going to be dealing with, which is the perfect timing, because Craig is doing the whole fatherhood thing, you know, him and Ren, that whole situation. And you can already tell it's already kind of taking its toll to a certain extent, because he's looking at the waves and he's just like, man, the waves looking good. So it's that thing of like, yeah, you know, I think there's going to be a big struggle next season of balancing, like, doing what he wants. That combines with just like his free time of wanting to surf, as well as his responsibilities to his family and getting money, because that money is also going to be used to sustain him and Ren and their baby. So there's that whole situation, but also just, I'm curious to see, I'm sure like his storyline with Jake would probably play a role in that as well, just kind of dictating, like, you know, Jake probably be telling him like, oh, I made mistakes not being there for you. But it's the whole thing of like, well, to be fair, Smurf did say that if I ever came around here, I wish that she would kill me. So there's that whole thing. Obviously, there's the whole Darren situation about, like, you know, he had to let Adrian go. So it's like, okay, so now there's that, because he ended up kind of choosing his family over being with Adrian, and even Adrian saying that line of like, I've loved you since we were kids, but you were the worst thing that's ever happened in my life. It's like, Jesus, that sucks. That's like the last moment between them, is that being said. So I'm sure Darren's going to still have some resentment, because it's like choosing the resentment of having to choose his family over Adrian, you know. I'm curious to see if that ends up coming back around, because I'm sure now that Smurf is dead, it's not just enemies, like, you know, other people in this game, you know, like a situation like Frankie. It's not just people like Frankie, which that's going to be an interesting thing, because Frankie's trying to worm her way back into the family fold and stuff like that. She tried it with Smurf. Obviously that didn't necessarily work out, but now here she is now, especially because she's making a connection with Jay. Like, he's going to be a little more receptive to her, especially because she's helped out now. So that's definitely going to be interesting. Like, the thing is, like, Frankie, it's hard to say whether you can trust her or not, especially because the boys kind of screwed her over last time they worked together. So I'm curious, like, she's got her own agenda, you know, so that's definitely going to be interesting. But obviously, like, there's that, I'm blanking on his name, but the detective that went to Adrian in the first place, the one who's obsessed with taking down the Codys, that dude, like, I'm sure he's going to take this opportunity to be like, yo. Well, because let's not forget, because they even, like, I think it was Craig and Pope had talked about the fact that it's like, look, like, there's actual cops here. So are they people that were on a take from Smurf, or are those cops here kind of gloating the fact that she's dead, you know? So there's that whole situation. Then there's a big anomaly that is, well, not anomaly, enigma, that is Angela, like, role she's playing in all this. It's interesting because for her, and I like that whole thing of, like, she's kicking up the Codys because it's too dangerous to be out on her own. Now she feels like she's got guards of her own, because obviously her relationship with Pope, that definitely keeps her safe, because even amongst the other Codys, she feels like no one's really going to mess with her, because Pope, not Darren, not Craig, not Jay, none of them are going to go against Pope to a certain extent. So Angela kind of feels secure in that regard. She's, you know, I mean, she isn't the first lady to kind of enter this world to try and, I mean, to be fair, she's been a part of this world to a certain extent for a long time, because obviously, you know, there's the whole, like, her and the Codys go back a ways, obviously everything with her and Julia. So I'm curious to see where the dynamic between Jay and Pope is, because obviously, like, Jay was like, yo, Pope, like, we need to kind of work together. So obviously, you know, because Angela had convinced Pope to kind of bring Jay back into the fold, because yeah, he's done some stuff, but he's still family and whatnot. So it's like, even convincing Jay is like, you need to be back in the fold, because the Codys will look after you just like they're going to look after me. So it's a very, like, symbiotic relationship. It kind of works out for everyone in that regard. So I'm curious to see what ends up happening. Are we going to have Angela going on more jobs, or is she just going to stay back? I'm sure the power is going to kind of go to her head about, like, oh, like, I'm so powerful now. What's also interesting too is that obviously the way season 4 ends, they made such a public thing. Like, people were literally around when they were doing their thing. And so I guess it's like, I mean, to be fair, it's meant to be a widespread message. They want a lot of people being like, whoa, the Codys are out. They're doing stuff in public. They don't care. So some people might stay away because they're like, yeah, the Codys are so crazy that maybe people might think Smurf was the only thing holding them back. Now that Smurf's gone, they're completely let loose and crazy. Or maybe it's just be a situation and people go like, oh, this is just the Codys flexing. We can come after them at any point in time. And like I said, it's going to be interesting to see, like I said, what new enemies, which old/new frenemies might show up in this whole situation. You know, it's a whole thing of finding out who you can trust and who you can't. Like I said, they've also got to figure this whole thing out, because the woman that Jay went to, that was the one that kind of handled stuff for Smurf, she won't do business with them because she doesn't have the same relationships. So they're going to have to make their own relationships with people who can fix stuff for them. So that's going to be a whole element to it. But these are just some thoughts that are flowing in my head. In the comments down below, let me know some of your thoughts. What do you want to see in season 5? What do you expect to see in season 5? I'd love to hear your thoughts about everything. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.